You know, history is full of powerful empires rising and falling, grand strategies, world-shaking battles, kings, emperors, revolutions. And then there's this story about a medieval Italian war that erupted, genuinely, no exaggeration, because someone stole a wooden bucket. Not treasure, not land, not a crown. A bucket. Today, we are diving deep into the War of the Oaken Bucket of 1325, one of the most stupidly glorious conflicts in human history. Grab some popcorn, grab your nearest bucket, and let's relive the medieval equivalent of two teenagers fighting over who borrowed whose hoodie. To understand why a bucket could trigger a war, you need to understand Italy in the 1300s. Imagine Game of Thrones. But everyone's wearing tights, and half the cast is drunk on homemade wine. Italy wasn't a united country yet. It was a collection of city-states, proud, rich, competitive, and incredibly petty. The two big factions were: the Guelphs supported the Pope, the Ghibellines supported the Holy Roman Emperor. And if you're thinking, oh, that sounds political and complicated, don't worry, they barely remembered what the argument was about either. They mostly just hated each other out of habit. Two rival cities in particular absolutely despised each other: Bologna, Guelphs; Modena, Ghibellines. These two cities treated rivalry like a full-time job. Football ultras today have nothing on these people. One day, in 1325, a few Modenese soldiers sneaked into Bologna. Why? Were they stealing trade secrets? Burning down a fortress? Assassinating a noble? No. They stole a bucket. A large, sturdy, wooden bucket from a public well in Bologna's town square. Why the bucket? No one knows. Maybe it looked stylish. Maybe they wanted a souvenir. Maybe they'd had a bit too much wine and said, "Oi lads, bet you won't nick that bucket." But Bologna woke up to find the sacred bucket gone. Kidnapped. Bucket napped. They were furious that you'd think they'd just ask for it back. But this is medieval Italy. They did not do normal. Instead, Bologna declared, "Return the bucket, or we go to war." Modena said, "LOL, no. War it is then. A war. Over a bucket. Look, you'd expect this whole situation to end with a stern letter or maybe someone having their bucket privileges revoked. But instead, both cities mobilized thousands of soldiers. Modena raised an army of around 7,000 men. Bologna summoned a massive force of over 30,000 to reclaim one bucket. Imagine being drafted into war and asking your commander, "So, what's the cause?" And he says, "Well, you see, the enemy has our bucket." And they'd all have to nod like that made sense. On November 15th, 1325, the two bucket-obsessed armies met in the Battle of Zappolino. This wasn't some small brawl. This was one of the biggest battles of the era. Bologna's army massively outnumbered Modena. But Bologna had a fatal weakness. They were bad. Modena's smaller, tighter force charged with full Ghibelline enthusiasm. The medieval version of "we fight harder because our bucket is better." Within hours, Bologna was collapsing. Their soldiers fled. Their cavalry ran for the hills. And the mighty city of Bologna, the one who started the war, was utterly humiliated. Modena then chased them all the way to the gates of Bologna. And here's the best part. After winning the battle, the Modenese army walked right up to Bologna's main gate, filled their stolen bucket with water from Bologna's own aqueduct, waved it in the air like a medieval mic drop, and then trotted away again. That's the 1325 equivalent of teabagging your opponent. Bologna begged for their bucket back. Modena refused. Negotiations stalled. Diplomats argued. Priests tried to mediate, and Modena's official response was basically, "No, it's our bucket now. Cope." And they kept it. Forever, Modena still has the bucket. You can go to Modena today, right now, and see it displayed proudly in their town hall, like some holy relic. Bologna never got it back. Imagine being the medieval curator polishing the bucket for 700 years. Truly a noble career. The War of the Oaken Bucket sounds like a drunken myth, but it genuinely shaped regional politics in Italy. Bologna's humiliation weakened the Guelph faction. Modena became more influential in northern Italy, and the bucket became a symbol of defiant Modenese pride. Every few decades, Bologna asked for the bucket back. Modena continued to say no. Tradition is tradition. The bucket is so famous that Italian poet Alessandro Tassini even wrote a satirical epic poem about it in the 17th century. Imagine living 300 years after a war and still thinking, Yes, this bucket thing is still funny enough to write a book about. Let's just quickly break down the logic of this war. Men steal bucket. Bucket belongs to Bologna. Modena refuses to return bucket. Bologna raises 30,000 troops. Modena says, "Come get it then." Bologna loses the war. Modena uses the bucket to make fun of them. Bucket becomes a national treasure. It's the most Italian thing ever. Honestly, it should be on their flag. Forget the tricolor. Give me a medieval bucket with a slice of Parmesan sticking out of it and a man shouting, "Mamma mia," in Latin. So there you have it. The War of the Oaken Bucket. A grand medieval conflict fought with swords, crossbows, cavalry. All because someone couldn't mind their own well. History is wild. People are petty. And Italy will always take the gold medal for turning small disagreements into operatic spectacles. If you enjoyed this bizarre slice of history, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the dumbest war you've ever heard of? I will absolutely make a video on it. Thanks for watching Vault of Yesteryear, where even a bucket can start a war.